Welcome to Bloom Today. We have an eye-opening show for you. We're going to be talking about the trauma that broke the camel's back.
Hi, I'm Paula Wallace, president of Bloom in the Dark, and this is
Ginny Priz, the single-handed Serenity Coach. Welcome to Bloom Today, where we talk about internal and external brokenness and how you can heal,
so that you can use the fertilizer of your past to bloom today. Hey everyone, we're excited to have you here today where we're talking about the trauma that broke the camel's back. Well, kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, except on our show we talk about trauma. So.
Only the light things for us.
Yes.
Have you ever had that moment where you just couldn't take it anymore and everything just kind of went on explosion?
Yeah, so thinking through the different opportunities I've had to kind of go into a psychotic mode, there were so many to choose from that it was difficult, actually, not because I didn't have any time where I severely overreacted to a situation, but the fact that that happened repeatedly in my life. And it's only been recently that I've truly understood why it was that way.
The explosions?
The explosions, my reaction to a trauma. Because a trauma is bad all by itself, doesn't matter what trauma it is.
Absolutely.
But when you react on the inside in a way that is totally disproportionate to the actual
to what's actually
seeming
happening
situation, that's a whole different story. Like the time somebody referred to me as an apple. Did I tell you about that?
Your new nickname is Macintosh.
I'm a Macintosh, not a computer. Wait, that's an apple. Anyhow, I think they actually meant the fruit, and it was a guy that I thought, honestly, I was going to marry. I was thousands of miles away from where I grew up.
And he referred to you as an apple?
Yes, and the funny thing is, you know how everyone says, if I was just skinnier, then I'd be loved or I'd be whatever. Well, the funny thing about this is I was like super skinny and really fit. And I'm finally here, can pursue a relationship thousands of miles away from where I was. And he says, oh, by the way, when you can't have an apple, it's like the most amazing thing in the world. But when somebody puts an apple in your hand, it's just an apple. And so since I was suddenly available and there,
I'm sorry, that's really...
Isn't that horrible?
Couldn't think of a better analogy.
Right. So that was a breakup.
I'm sorry.
It was hurtful.
That's unnecessarily.
It is funny after the fact. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it
is. But I mean, that's your Jane letter in this case, right?
But the way it hit me at that time was devastating. Not just this is the guy I thought I was going to marry. This is a relationship that I've had in my head as the end all for several years now, and it's finally a real let's move forward with it time frame. But it put me into a tailspin that sent me into a full-scale food addiction. So I suddenly had an umbilical cord attached to the refrigerator. It wasn't just I'm eating a little too much emotionally because I'm struggling or something. No, I gained 72 pounds in 6 months. So that gives you an idea that this kind of hits.
To fill that hole that he had left. But I mean, I've gone through breakups, and I've gone through a breakup where I thought I was going to marry someone. I was living with them, but I didn't gain 72 pounds.
You didn't?
Thank goodness. It did start me on the path to being an alcoholic.
Oh, there you go.
But in my history, I had lots of cycles of explosions because I stuffed all of my emotions. And instead of feeling them or feeling like I could ever express them, so I tried to stuff them so I could be the good little girl and be helpful for people instead of expressing that I had a different opinion or expressing that I had different needs or I didn't like something that was happening. I just kind of stuffed it. Well, guess what? It can only stuff so much until there's some kind of explosion that happens, and I would unload onto somebody, and it would be loud, and it would be nasty, and there'd be a lot of doors slamming, and more passive aggressive than aggressive until it got really aggressive. So it was just a cycle that continued. But for me also, it went even further because that all kind of compounded those years and years of stuffing. And then when I did get a DUI after all of those years of drinking, and I finally got that DUI, my entire identity crumbled. And I had friends or people, acquaintances in my life that would say, oh, well, I had a DUI, but it just means that you stopped drinking or you just stopped drinking and driving.
Take a class, right?
We do have to take a class here in Tennessee and learn about alcohol and our relationship to it and all of that. But, a lot of people would say, well, you just kind of move on. Like, it's something that happened, but you move on. For me, I felt like my whole life was destroyed. And people were having a hard time understanding why I just could not get over it or get over the shame of the situation. And it wasn't necessarily just because of the DUI, but because of all of these other things that had come to this point of stuffing to try to be good enough, try to be good enough, try to be good enough, try to be good enough. And then when that last thing happens where I'm really not good enough, then it all hits me in a way where all of that not good enough all along the line just kind of compounded in that moment. The trauma that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, it's devastating when that happens. And what's incredible is when you start realizing that my reaction with the food addiction to that situation wasn't just about that situation.
Right.
Yeah, my heart was broken, but it was actually about all of the trauma and brokenness I had before, compounded with the rejection and the fact that I'm thousands of miles away from family or friends, the fact that, I have no idea who I am or what I'm doing now because I had thought one direction and that was all changed. But at the end of the day, my resiliency, recovery, my processing wasn't healthy normal because I wasn't healthy normal when that situation happened.
Right.
And that's a piece of what we're talking today is recognizing that anytime you have an extreme reaction to a situation, in some cases with high trauma, that includes PTSD. An event will start triggering PTSD.
Right.
But that usually ties back to childhood trauma or brokenness, where a healthy person having that same trauma as an adult wouldn't necessarily get PTSD.
Exactly.
From that. So whether it's war or it's just a broken heart or it's
a car crash,
a home invasion where your stuff gets stolen, or just so many different things that I've run into people like us who have had a severe reaction to a place of brokenness that is bad enough on its own.
Right.
They're all devastating. But where the spiral that can throw us into is even worse.
Exactly.
Than that.
That overreaction is a really big red flag for any of us when we are overreacting to something, and the trigger is much smaller than our reaction. That's a huge red flag that there's something else, there's something deeper, there's something that's happened earlier on that we are feeling at the same time, and that we still have not been able to process or heal through.
So for awareness sake, we have a few things that are so helpful both to the victim. Like in my case, having been a childhood victim of all different types of abuse, it's understanding that the victim needs more compassion, needs more support, needs an extra hand, and that for you could give them you if you were there, you weren't there.
What if I could?
Yeah.
This is my way, though, by educating. And churches as well, and counselors and people who are, counselors are trained in this area, and they know better than anyone, coaches, but just a friend. If you're just a friend to someone who seems to be overreacting, a lot of times we feel like, whoa, I don't want to be any part of this overreaction. They're so dramatic. What's wrong with them? Well, guess what? There's actually probably something bigger wrong here that, and that's why in Galatians 6:9 it says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. And in a lot of my coaching clients, I see a lot of the same things where they benefit from my just receiving how they're reacting and walking through them and accepting them for what they're feeling. And I'm able to not take their reactions personally because I understand that there's deeper hurt that they're still possibly carrying.
Right, and usually when we're the ones severely overreacting, we think we're crazy. We're getting other people telling us that we're crazy.
Yeah.
And the fact is, when there is that compassion and support that gives us the opportunity to go, okay, kind of every trauma triggers an opportunity to heal. I like saying that.
Yes, it is.
Because it's a warning system that tells you that there's something more, there's a bigger problem, there's a deeper issue, and you can use that opportunity to get help, not just for the current trauma or issue, but actually ask for help in working through previous damage, previous hurt, unresolved issues, where we're recognizing that until something is processed and healed, it is going to make anything worse.
Right. It's like we're walking around with an open wound on our heart, and when something happens, another trauma happens, you're not just like poking somebody with a stick, you're poking the open wound, you're rubbing salt in that. So you're feeling that first wound at the same time that you're also feling
a whole lot of others.
This new wound, and it's just consistently unable to heal. And so you never get to the point where you are going to be able to have the appropriate reaction or the same kind of level of reaction until you've been able to heal first.
Right, and with PTSD, you can actually be reverting to a childhood trauma mindset or behavior pattern or capacity. So for me, an adult trauma trigger would send me to 5 years old, for instance, and then I'm reacting to this situation like a 5-year-old, and somebody else can just be looking like, why is she acting like a child? Well, I was acting like a child because I was actually in a trauma trigger PTSD state to trauma that was done to me when I was 5, because this situation triggered it. And when people started recognizing, wait a second, this is really a problem, then they started helping me work through the 5-year-old trauma in addition to this whatever current thing that was triggering and making that worse, which was hugely helpful for me to actually be able to grow up past that trauma and heal from it.
I'm really thankful that you have done that.
This show wouldn't work very well if I hadn't done it.
If I accidentally triggered you and you turned into a 5-year-old, it would be crazy. But God is so good that
He's a healer.
that He has actually brought that to you and brought you forward through the next. But you got professional help.
I did get professional help, and that is where the people around you can support you and help you. To start out with, for years, I thought counseling was bad. I thought that getting help meant failure. I didn't realize that the healthy thing to do when you're dealing with brokenness and a broken past and a broken situation or a trauma is to get help. That's
to
like
reach out.
If you're broken physically, if you have a broken arm, people would think you're stupid if you don't go to the doctor and get it set and wear a cast, right?
Right.
But emotionally, we many times judge people who have the emotional broken arm if they want to go get help, when we should be encouraging to get help through a pastor, a Celebrate Recovery or recovery program.
Sure, support groups, anonymous programs.
A psychiatrist.
Coaches, whatever it is that you may need. And each one of us is going to be at a different place. And each one of us might need something a little bit different, or we might need a counselor and a coach.
Or in my case, all of the above. Over 10 years of healing, it has kind of been a whole series, from medication to spiritual intervention to counseling, coaches, recovery program, support groups. God has used all of the above to help with healing and support and encouragement and accountability and whatever the pieces were. So we can all do something about it, and we can all help each other.
And we really do. If we can recognize the fact that we're not just these people who are, I don't want to deal with this person because they're too much for me, and we can just meet them where they're at and show them God's love in that place.
Where 2 Corinthians 1:5 says, "For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ." This is a hopeful place. So every time I realize that there's a trauma trigger, I say it's an opportunity to heal. I get to run to God. I get to go do something about it.
Leveling up to the next
piece with
of healing.
new things, new digging, sometimes processing hurt from the past at a new level.
Right.
But with ultimately more joy, more healing, more abundance, more comfort. It's so worth it.
Absolutely. And I think we have a poem that speaks a little bit more to this topic, which which I think is beautiful. Would you share that with us?
Sure. It's called The Dark Times in Life. Life can take a turn you never thought it would. Suddenly, so much can change with so little that's understood. You ask so many questions, it seems without reply. Your heart is pained with so much doubt and unanswered questions. Why? It's almost like we walk through life just feeling our way around. We can't see the road ahead, nor our feet on the ground. Darkness is all about us. We struggle to see that light, just a glimmer now and then, but then it fades out of sight. We cry out to God again to show us where to go. He says, just take another step to where peace freely flows. And as we keep on taking steps guided by the Lord, we find in time, we walk into that joy that we knew before. It's in those times of darkness, kind of like blooming in the dark, when we feel we've lost all hope. God can do a work in us that brings a deeper growth. So when we face the dark times, we should come before the Lord, for good will come if we believe, and hope shall be restored. And that's by M.S. Lowndes. And I love it when we get to share little art pieces that bring beauty and creativity into a discussion of darkness.
Obviously, someone else has been through the darkness and the healing
Yes.
as well. So again, we are not alone, and we're really not alone today because we have a guest that's coming on that I am excited to introduce. We were talking about professional as well. She's
a real professional.
Real professional. She's a professional counselor, professional life coach. She also has a Bachelor of Science in Sociology and Anthropology.
And she's a pastor.
And she's a pastor, and she's
What is she not?
an
Like,
author
seriously.
as well now. So Lisa Hooks, would you come on and please?
So excited. Can you
welcome
give
to
her
our
a hand?
kitchen.
Oh, hello.
Absolutely. I'd like to
I
give
get
you a
that.
hand, Lisa.
Woo! Praise God, I got the hand.
Raise the roof, girl.
Yes, honey. Praising God. Hello.
Hey.
Thank you for coming in
so
and
much for having me.
yeah,
Oh my
absolutely. You are, you have totally bloomed to this place of education and all kinds of good, I want to say performance, but that's probably not the best word for it.
Obedience.
Achievement, obedience. Perfect.
To God, letting Him direct my path. Yeah.
And you had, obviously on our show we talk about brokenness,
Yes.
Our personal testimonies and stories.
Yes.
And before a lot of these amazing things that God has done in your life and that He's used you to do in other people's lives, you had a really devastating trauma that happened when you were 17. Do you mind telling us about it?
Sure. Yeah. So my mom and I, we have these special moments where I would sit in her lap and we would play kissy face and we would just talk about our day and my day. And normally at the end she'll say, "You mama's baby," and I'll say yes. And so we'll just, go on from there. This particular evening, we had our moment, and she said, "You mama's baby." Well, I said, "No." I said, "I'm a big girl now." Well, I had an ulterior motive for that because I wanted to go on birth control. So I had to start presenting myself
As an adult, yeah.
as an adult.
Yeah.
So I said, "No, I'm a big girl now." And her countenance completely changed. And I saw this sadness, but it was no problem because I know how to fix this.
Right.
Right? So I give her a more kissy face. She smiles again. And I said, "I'm going to do my homework." Went downstairs to do my homework. And in less than 15 minutes, I heard a gunshot. And as I ran up the stairs and went to my mother's bedroom, she was laying dead on the floor from a gunshot wound to the head.
Wow.
That's just devastating.
And I saw my mother, and I saw the Bible on the bed. So immediately, "Lord, why did you let this happen?"
Right.
I immediately had a disconnect. We were a Christian family. I immediately had a disconnect. And all the processes happened after that, the funeral and whatnot. And I was just left at that point to grieve from a trauma,
Right.
very significant trauma that would be considered PTSD at a certain point.
Right.
And
So you're exhibiting symptoms of PTSD.
I was
from
exhibiting. I had
Right.
a lot of
Nightmares.
the nightmares, the night terrors, the fear, the memory, just the replays. Yeah.
And you blamed yourself for a while for that too.
Well, I
didn't you?
blamed myself because it wasn't long after that what if you would have said, yeah, your mama's baby?
Right.
Would she have still killed herself?
Right.
You know, what if you had saw the signs of suicide? You know, her contemplation. Could you have stopped it? Because prior to that, I saw, while we were sitting there playing kissy face, I saw the gun on the bed. I saw the Bible, I saw the medication, but it didn't mean much to me because we had weapons in the house for security, and I've seen the gun in her bedroom laying around in different areas.
Okay.
So it didn't trigger anything.
Right.
It was a norm.
Okay.
But if I had known she had been contemplating suicide, would that moment have triggered something? Mom, why do you have the gun on the bed?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well,
So,
we can. I mean,
yeah.
we can.
So we
torment.
torment ourselves, and there is some spiritual torment
Yeah.
too. There's some spiritual torment. We can torment ourselves, and so yeah, I had to deal with that. And then of course I had the family that kept the family secrets. So I find out later that she had in fact talked about suicide, threatened suicide with other family members.
Right. But
Okay.
you weren't aware of it.
I was not
right?
aware of that. I did not know she had major depression and she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I didn't know that.
No, and then you had your own
So when I see this
damage.
medication on the bed, I don't know what to think about that.
Right.
You know?
Why would you?
Yeah.
Right. But that wasn't the first trauma that had happened in your life.
No, that was not the first trauma, and this is it. And I was listening to the conversation, and I love where you went with that, because here's what I want to show you. There's resilience. Trauma can create resiliency. It can create strength, right?
Absolutely.
So when I experienced this trauma with my mom, I was dating my current husband, and he knew my mom, and we were teenagers, and he didn't know how to handle that. He didn't know how to handle me. He did the best he could to be a boyfriend. We married shortly after high school, and we started having marital problems. Well, I'm not healed. I'm broken.
No.
Right.
I'm grieving. I don't know what to do with marital problems.
Right.
What do you do with marriage problems, right? Well, my reaction was anger, right? Because not because it was the right thing to do, but it was the normal thing to do for me, because it was a trauma that I saw as a child with the domestic violence.
Right.
Right.
Right? Learned behavior.
Yes.
But you witnessed it in pretty
I
extreme.
witnessed it in extreme, not only with my own family, but with extended family members. I'm talking blood splatter, you know.
Wow.
And it wasn't, and here's the thing, it wasn't a situation where the women were just being beaten. No, they were fighting, knocked down, dragged out. The
Wow.
women
They were fighting back.
were just
Right.
as aggressive.
Right.
You know, so now this aggression that I didn't know I had,
Starts coming up.
but because I'm vulnerable, it came to the surface.
Right.
My husband didn't know. He looked at me like I was crazy. Like, what is happening? What?
But I know that there's, yeah. What is my wife doing?
And along with that, though, so now I have this unresolved trauma from my mother's death. I have unresolved trauma from the domestic violence. But then I was exposed to pornography when I was 8. Okay?
Which is another trauma.
And as a teenager, when I became sexually active, you know, pornographic thoughts started coming back to my mind. There was a guy in my freshman year, he brought a page and showed it to me, and it just really triggered.
Right.
We have so many things that are dormant that can just be triggered in a minute.
And then all of these things
And
are
then
starting
all
to
of these things happen.
compound. So,
So
how did
now-
God come into this whole thing and turn around for you?
Yeah. So now I'm dealing with the anger, the aggression, and now I'm dealing with the pornographic thoughts. But there was one thing that stood firm. When I was younger, I knew the love of Christ. His love, and I knew that everything that I was feeling was not correct. The anger that I had towards God was not right, because God was a good God. He was a loving God. And so when I rededicated my life to Christ, the first question was, Lord, why did you let this happen to my mother? He didn't answer me.
Well, and you ended up, no, but you ended up over time not only processing all these different areas of brokenness, but you ended up then going for training so that you could help provide that solution
and this is why.
And give hope to others.
Yeah, he didn't answer me. He said, it's not about that. It's about our relationship.
Right.
So when he redirected me back to our relationship, I developed that relationship, that love, that trust again. Then I was open to be led to do everything else that he told me to do. He gave me pockets of healing. You know, we have pockets
and it's
of
a
healing.
Process.
And it's a process, because, you know, a lot of things don't happen right away. He gave me pockets of healing. And as I continued to listen to him, submit to him, he put me in positions that I didn't think I was equipped for, counseling positions in the church. And then he finally sent me to school for counseling. And now I'm helping people work through their own traumas and crises and emotional concerns.
And bringing that forward. Bringing that healing forward.
In ministry, in books, yeah, absolutely.
Which is so incredible to see that pattern of the brokenness and catalysts that set all that off, and then but God. And God walking through that.
That's the foundation.
To healing, which means she gets our ex-victim.
You are our ex-victim of the week, Lisa. Surprise!
Surprise! You've never seen this before, right?
So much.
That we have, you know, the chocolates and the tissues, because you need to be able to deal with the emotions and process them and work through it.
Especially after we just opened everything up.
Yeah, because we sit here triggering and talking about it all. And then the ex-victim. So you get to wear it as your celebration.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
That you're an ex-victim now.
Not just living in that anymore, but free from that.
Thank you.
You are
and
walking
helping
in
others.
freedom and helping others as well, which is something that many of us work hard to get to, to get to that place. And thank you for showing us that it is possible.
And then we discuss how when you can take that fertilizer, that damage in your past, and you can actually start working with it so that you can work to bloom.
Bloom today.
To bloom today. So you get to bloom today.
A free PDF copy of the Bloom in the Dark book and a full list of Bloom Today's coaching tools can be found on bloomtodaytv.com. Then visit Bloom Today's Facebook group for deeper conversation.
Alpha.